Welcome to another episode of Talking Nerdy in the Bedroom with just me. For the second time, it's just going to be me. Mike, Corey are both sick, and I felt like doing an episode with it being the end of 2022 to kind of talk about the podcast in general. The idea I had years ago, obviously podcasting not necessarily my idea in general. I mean, I'd like to take credit for it. Don't think I can, but I had the idea to potentially do a podcast with friends, talk about nonsense that never really culminated into everything. Then got very into escape rooms and then owned an escape room. And then after we closed the escape room after a few years, wanted to keep talking about escape rooms. So there was almost a podcast about escape rooms, which there still may be an episode of that in the future because they're great. Everybody should do them. Big plug for escape rooms. But I was going to be doing it with other owners of escape rooms and do that, but it never really happened. And then COVID happened and everybody was so separate and away from one another that as soon as that kind of went, it wasn't away because I mean, COVID is still a thing. But as soon as that got less, everybody got vaccinated, that was going to get vaccinated. It just made sense to try to like actually pull the trigger on this. So talking to Corey about it, I was like, hey, I want to do a podcast. He's like, yeah, I do that. We already talk about stuff anyway. Then it was about, okay, if it's just Corey and I, we kind of have the same type of mentality regards to most TV shows, most movies. Granted, not everything as you've heard through the podcast, but a lot of stuff. So we really need somebody else that potentially could be different than us, but also still likes the same stuff that we do and will bring a different, interesting take to it. So we grabbed Mike, who had experience already doing a podcast before. I'm not sure how long it lasted. I think this one has definitely lasted longer. But we wanted to have at least 3 people so that we could basically have, I don't want to say, like we all have different experiences, and that's kind of what makes podcasting interesting. You never know what you're going to hear or do, but you don't want somebody so different from you as a co-host that you never know exactly what you're going to get. You like things that are spontaneous, but you kind of want to know, hey, this is what we're talking about. Hey, you're going to show up and be consistent. So having Mike and Corey has definitely done that. And we literally started recording on an iPhone just to see if we could talk for an hour, hour and a half, whatever it ends up being. We ended up talking for, I don't know, something like 2, maybe even 2.5 hours for the first podcast for Batman, the new Batman movie. And once we learned that we could talk that much and it really wasn't that big of a deal, which I assumed, but you never really know when there's a microphone in your face, I decided to pull the trigger. Bought all the equipment so that it actually sounded good, because if you listen to that first episode about Batman, I am so sorry. It sounds awful. It was a good little throwback now when we listen to it to go, okay, that's where we started. Here's where we are now. Then to have my boss, or I should say my ex-boss, who's a musician, come and help me set up all the equipment so that it sounds good as long as we are facing the microphone, because sometimes we forget to do that. To have it sound this professional quality compared to other podcasts I've heard, even popular ones, I'm a big fan of that. The podcast is something that I very much enjoy doing, and having this level of equipment, having this functionality with everything that I have, with recording with Focusrite and then on to Cakewalk and then editing it, everything, even though it's a little bit time consuming, is kind of fun. It's fun to do everything. Now, we all know that podcasting is just listening to people, so we try to make it interesting for everybody who's going to listen. I know that there are tons of alternatives out there, from TV to radio to other podcasts. There's so much content out there that people can consume on their daily commutes, just doing stuff around the house, or just if you want to hear something different and interesting. So we try to put that out there. We have this large schedule that we go through for all the nerdy stuff that is basically written out for each week, what we're going to talk about, and then ideas for the future of what we want to do. I mean, this recap is episode 33. So there's been 32 episodes before this over this past year of us talking about so much nerdy stuff. Like, it is the perfect time to be a nerd and enjoy this stuff because the content from the streaming, content from regular TV, from movies, from everything, there's just so much out there. And when we started this, I was hoping that it would just keep going. It's always a good excuse to sit around and chat with your friends, but you don't necessarily know how it's going to go. You don't know if people are going to fall off from it, if schedules are going to change, if no one just feels like doing it anymore. But at least we have the content out there to watch and to do episodes on so that we can talk about. The best part about our podcast is that even though there's a little bit of structure with me asking questions and trying to figure out what their thoughts are on different shows and movies while explaining mine, there's no real format. I feel like that's the best way to do it, with just having conversations and kind of like letting it go wherever it goes. So that's why sometimes when we're talking about something like Doctor Strange 2, or we're talking about Harry Potter, and then we get sidetracked and merge into Star Wars again, or other Marvel projects, or DC, or cartoons, whatever it ends up being, it just feels like a natural conversation that you would have with your friends, which is one of the reasons why I love doing this, because it's two of my buddies and we just shoot the shit for an hour or so, then put it for everybody else to listen to. I have a few listeners that have reached out that have basically said listening to us is very similar to sitting in a group of friends and just listening to them shoot the shit, especially if you're in that wallflower, so to speak, where you just kind of sit back and people watch. It's one of those where you can just sit, laugh at us making fun of each other, laugh at us for getting every name wrong possible of all the characters. We are terrible with that. We forget names just because there's so many. We pronounce names wrong. We do all these things, and it's usually very stupid and comical, and it at least makes us laugh. So hopefully that is translating to whatever you guys are wanting. We have a ton of stuff to go over in the new year. We're going to be doing Rings of Power will be our first episode back, which was supposed to happen last month, but then with sicknesses, vacations, holidays, everything kind of got screwed up. So we've got Rings of Power coming up. Then we've got Andor. I think we're going to be doing an episode on Rick and Morty in the future. We're actually going to be doing a fantasy football episode when we get closer to the Super Bowl. We're going to be doing a episode on, I don't even know if I already said it just a second ago, but Rick and Morty. We're going to be doing the new shows that are coming out for Marvel, like not Secret Wars, that's going to be the movie. We'll definitely be doing that if we're still doing this podcast in like 3 years. But Secret Invasion we'll be doing. Anything Marvel will be doing. Anything DC, which DC is supposed to have another big year, even though it's going to be completely for naught with them going to a different universe or different movie structure. Who knows? But we'll still be reviewing that stuff. We'll be reviewing the new shows that come out that catch our attention, the new movies. I know at one point we want to do the new Avatar movie. We just got to wait for these other two. We'll call them jabronis. They have to see it first. And that's a 3 hour, 15-minute, 3 hour and a half movie. So it's probably going to take a little bit for them to actually go to the theater and watch it, but who knows? We're also going to be trying to do a couple cool things with setting up video once we can get that squared away. We also wanted to potentially do a Dungeons and Dragons type of quest on the podcast one time. We also had talking to a friend of ours who does LARPing. We wanted to do a bunch of nerdy stuff. We also have this great idea for a cooking episode where we're going to be cooking stuff from nerdy type of cookbooks like Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like that, and have the cameras rolling the entire time that I'll have to edit and see what stupid hilarity rolls out, or if there's anything in there that people go, ooh, I could make that, or if it's just awful and we taste terrible things. We had some videos last year on TikTok where we tried some terrible Japanese soda. We tried some overseas candy and snacks. And yeah, those were all on TikTok, and those were kind of fun to do. They just weren't what we necessarily expected from it. I think we had some other ideas that kind of, time is not what it should be. There's so many ideas and not enough hours in the day and not enough time to get everybody together. And then along with editing and everything else, oh God, I sound like I'm just complaining the entire time. Just saying, we have a lot of ideas, a lot of things we want to do. But the reason for this podcast is kind of to talk about what we've already done. And I know that we've shared some stuff on our Facebook and other social media about, like, the majority of our people are actually listening through Apple Podcasts, which is kind of cool. Even though we're mostly publishing on Anchor, which is through Spotify, it looks like the vast majority, over 50% of people, are listening through Apple Podcasts, and then another big majority of Spotify. But that's kind of cool information to have, and that most of the people that are listening are from the United States, even though we have had people from Bulgaria, from Poland, from Panama, from Germany, to the United Kingdom. I also know, it's not on here, but I know because somebody has reached out, somebody from Australia has listened to the podcast, so it's definitely gone everywhere, which is kind of cool. Whether those people are still listening at this moment, I have no idea. I hope you are. I hope that we've entertained you and given you some interesting information, or just some interesting takes, or maybe you just laugh at us. Maybe you laugh at how dumb we are. I know we do that with each other, but I know, like, we have had a lot of people enjoy the podcast, and I know that just from us here, we've enjoyed the podcast of just doing it. It gives us an hour to 2 hours every week, guaranteed, to just sit and shoot the shit. There's not enough of that in this world where people are just enjoying everybody else's company without necessarily being on the go. Sure, we're recording, we've got headphones on, we've got microphones in front of us, I've got a computer in front of me so I can look up information and make sure everything is recording properly, but in general, it's just shooting the shit. It's a little bit more me asking questions than I probably would in a normal conversation to, like, get at the heart of some things, but for the most part, it's just conversations that are fun, that leave you kind of understanding the other person's point of view, even if you don't agree with it, more on a certain subject, whether it's a movie, TV show, whatever. And having that week in and week out is definitely, I've found, very beneficial, that I feel like everybody should have with a group of their friends, whether it's just two people, one person, a whole group of them, where you just all get together at least once a month. I mean, if you can't do once a week like we're doing because of a podcast, it's kind of understandable, but get together once a month and just laugh and talk and enjoy yourself. The world is a scary place and has been, but it's even got worse since the pandemic, because nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's scared. Everybody fears misinformation. Everybody doesn't know exactly what they should do, but everybody kind of wants to do the right thing. It's just nobody knows what that is. So a podcast, even though it doesn't sound like it, it's given us the ability to not only come together to talk and enjoy ourselves, but also kind of forget everything else that's going on during these conversations. Like, it doesn't matter necessarily what happened at work. It doesn't matter what happens in your personal life. It doesn't matter anything else. You're just kind of hanging out with your buddies and shooting the shit. We're hoping that it feels that way for a lot of the people that are listening, where during this time, you're just listening to us give each other shit, laugh about stupid things, make comments that sometimes people get upset about, whether it's our opinion on Black Panther, or of him thinking that Killmonger could have been like a more integral part of the story of Black Panther 2. People got upset about that because Killmonger in the What If universe, when he gets all power, he ends up killing lots of people and kind of destroying everything. We get that, but that was just our opinion on one thing, mostly because of Michael B. Jordan's performance. So we're going to have these things in these podcasts where we have these opinions, whether they're right or whether they're wrong. They're still fun to have. They're fun to talk about. They're fun to argue about. Mike and Corey can say whatever they want. They argue with me just as much as I argue with them. It sometimes just gets edited out due to either it not being funny or it got too heated, like the one that we posted anyway. So there's a ton of stuff that we hope gets out there to people, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. It's just hopefully fun to listen to. Even if it gives you a hot take afterwards, to me, that's still fun to listen to. It gave you more content to talk about. It ended up putting more eyes on everything. I'm totally fine with this. I also stand by the statement that Michael B. Jordan should have been a bigger part of that movie, whether that he was Black Panther or not. You can leave that up for debate, but he definitely should have been. They could have easily explained it. Anyway, won't get back into Black Panther 2, but I will talk about the other episodes just briefly. That we had one episode. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was Doctor Strange. And I remember after taping it that I hated it. I'm pretty sure I took the headset off and went, that sucked. And now the episode itself did one of our best numbers we did, but I don't believe it was because of that. I just think it was because Doctor Strange 2 just came out. It was very timely, but I tried to do more of a structure with it, and it just didn't feel natural. It didn't feel natural at all. If I watch a podcast, I don't want one that has this strict structure where you don't have a free-flowing conversation. Instead, there's just this like question and answer, like an interview, which I don't like. I want it to feel like it's a conversation that you would have at a water cooler at work. Well, maybe not with the profanity, but either way. Or just a conversation with a friend while you're driving or while you're FaceTiming or anything else. Just conversations that are fun to have. So with that episode ended, I made it a point that we wouldn't do that anymore. Now, I still have information brought up. I still have little cheat sheet of what we're going to do next time and a cheat sheet of certain facts about the movie or TV show we're talking about. But I just kind of like let it flow, and I think it does pretty well. So this podcast is now, we went in 2022. We filmed the first one in April, but I don't think we released it until May. Yeah, the first episode released in May, even though we recorded it a couple weeks before. So from May through December, that's 7 months that we've done the podcast, and now we're heading into 2023 with some fun things planned, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll kind of see where this whole thing takes us. This episode, I didn't really want to be that long. I didn't want to do a thing where we played clips, as I just feel like so many things do that at the end of the year, to just do clips of it. And I think we might do that next year once we get the cameras rolling, because I think that'll be better. But I will do the top 5 real quick of our podcast, of things that, like, the podcast I liked the most. Number 1 actually is going to come in as the Riff Tracks episode, where we picked movies in the month of October for Halloween, where we picked scary movies that are like B, C, D rated. They're not good, like the worst of the worst. And it was so fun to watch the movies and then talk about them, because it's not like we got anything out of it besides for lack of enjoyment. Like, the movies weren't that good. They weren't really worth talking about, except for do this episode of the podcast. So for me, that was one of my favorites to do. So that was probably number 1 for me. Number 2 for me, I know I'm going in reverse order, but why make you wait to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Number 2 is also in the same month, which was our 25th episode special. So that one, we all picked a TV show that the other one hadn't seen, and started watching the shows. Corey picked Battlestar Galactica, which I started to watch and did enjoy, but now that we don't have to watch it, I've kind of fallen off of it. Mike picked Yellowstone, which I have run through, and am waiting for the new season to finish airing so I can just watch it all in one sitting rather than waiting. Then I picked Misfits, which still remains as one of my favorite shows, especially a BBC show. So making them watch it and hearing their reaction to it was very interesting to me, because it's one of those shows that I don't think got super popular in America. It was huge in BBC land. It was huge so overseas. Some people over here did watch it, especially when it started hitting streaming, but it never got like cultural acclaim, and nor should it really get it. But it should have gotten attention for being crazy. Like, The Boys gets a lot of attention, and this was a more immature version of The Boys before The Boys was a thing. So that was another episode I very much enjoyed doing. Third for us was probably going to be the Stranger Things Part 2 episode, so that's probably my third favorite, just because we were so hyped for Stranger Things, and it lived up to it, minus the ending, because obviously it's going to make us wait another 2 years. But we had so much to talk about, and we all basically were chomping at the bit to watch the next few episodes as soon as Netflix released them. So that was like a big one for us. Even though the movies didn't really live up to it, I'm going to merge in 3 different Marvel movies as number 4, with Thor: Love and Thunder, with with Doctor Strange 2, and then also Black Panther. We have been looking forward to these all year, and even though they didn't really hit the bar where we wanted them to hit, they still brought a very fun level of the podcast. We got to talk about, because most of them were done shortly after seeing the movie, so we had to talk about everything we liked or didn't like in the movie, while also trying to understand the movie better. Similar with like Thor: Love and Thunder, I didn't really in the beginning see that it was Korg explaining the movie to kids, so maybe that was it was a little bit more kiddie or campy. Mike pointed that out, so then the movie made a little bit more sense for why it was like that. It still didn't make it a great movie, but it's something that I didn't see right away. So things like that, where after you just see a movie where you're still in your phase of kind of like making a determination on the movie, if you could talk to others and they have a different take, it might also change your take because you didn't notice something or see something. So those type of movies that we were looking forward to, definitely love doing them in the podcast. I can't wait for Ant-Man 3 to talk about it during the podcast. I can't wait for the Marvels Part 2, then also clearly Guardians 3. When all those come out, to be able to sit here at the podcast to have the 3 of us, or if Casey comes and guest stars again, which big thanks to Casey for guest starring as much as he has and helping us out when Corey was sick. But having having him here and having everybody here to talk about the newest stuff is definitely a lot of fun, and I think it helps with processing the movie. Now, for number 5, even though I already talked about how bad it sounds, my favorite's going to be the first one that we did. Even though it's the Batman movie, we also talked about other Batmans. We talked about DC movies in general, but for the most part, talked about the new Batman movie. And even though I didn't like it, and the podcast sounds terrible sound quality-wise, it's still our first podcast. It's also on a sad note, my dog hadn't passed away yet, so you can kind of still hear him in the background with his nails tapping the ground, or us trying to move him around because he was just trying to get love and attention as we were trying to record the podcast. He did pass away like a week after that, so it's a little bit bittersweet as it's the only one that you can kind of hear him on. So that one's always going to hold a special place in my heart for so many different reasons. But that's probably my top 5 of the year. All of them are really fun to go back and listen to. I've listened to them multiple times because obviously we're recording it, with editing it, and then usually I try to listen to it whenever I have time throughout the week, just to make sure everything sounds okay, and just to make sure if somebody has a question, I'm able to kind of like answer it. So those are my top 5s. It's been a fun year. I'm very excited for 2023 for where this goes. Not sure where that is. Maybe it's just going to be this same thing for the next year. Who knows? If it is, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with getting with my buddies once a week, shooting the shit, laughing our asses off, enjoying stupid nerdy stuff from movies, TV shows, video games, comics, whatever else there is. We're just enjoying all of it, and it's been fun. I appreciate everybody that listens. I hope that you're getting something out of it, or even if it's just making fun of us, hope you're getting something out of it. I'll wrap that up here. Next week, everybody's back in the studio next week. We're going to be doing Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings show that is the prequel to both Lord of the Rings and to The Hobbit. So we'll be talking about that, even though it ended back in October. We're a little bit late. It's fine. So we're going to be talking about that next week with everybody back in. So we'll see you next week.